Yeah, we were like cats. If it fits, I sit.
Sits, right?
And it's like we're kind of wiggling into these places. We're like, oh yeah, this is comfy if I sit just like this. I mean.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Well Shit. It really is that simple. I'm Claire.
And I'm Serena. On this podcast, we help you to understand about your 12 universal needs, why they are currently not being well met,
How to meet them in ways that work for you, and how to consistently do so in quick, easy, and simple ways that fit seamlessly into your life.
We'll also help you to understand how doing so will have a positive ripple effect in literally every area of your life.
If you like what you hear, sign up for more support with meeting your needs with your weekly Universal Needs notes at theuniversalneeds.com.
And enjoy the show.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, everyone.
So, how are we doing this morning?
It's kind of a gloomy, cold, rainy day on the island, which makes everything a little bit more challenging.
Well, given the fact that I just spent a few moments there trying to change my setup because I thought there was a reflection on my pop screen and discovered it was actually a piece of fluff on my monitor. So, yeah, that's where we're at this morning.
Yeah, and a lack of coffee, trying tea for caffeine. Let's see how this goes.
No,
I have hope, but I mean...
Well, I mean, I do decaf normally anyway, so I'm on the ginger tea in the hope that I'll get a bit of a zing, that will help as well. But actually, I think it's go off the back of our last podcast. It's kind of perfect that we're where we are this morning because we're talking about control this morning, and perfectionism and control tend to kind of show up often side by side because our tendency to want to be perfect, we tend to try to create perfection by trying to control everything. And so it's kind of perfect that the last podcast we recorded actually quite late at night. So we were in a space where we probably weren't going to be perfect, and we did that consciously. That was like a mindful decision. Let's do it now because we know it's probably not going to be perfect, and that's exactly what we want for that episode. And it's kind of also interesting in a good way that this morning we're doing something about control where we're not in a space where we're going to control, like we wouldn't, I mean, even if we were still in that space. I mean, we're both recovering people who very much spent a lot of their time focusing on trying to control things, right?
Yep, trying to control the situation. And
absolutely, and like recovering perfectionists. So the fact that we're doing this podcast now where things are a little kind of lower energy than they would normally be when we start recording, I actually think is quite a good thing. I think it fits very well with like we're not controlling everything, because there was a time where I think we would have gone, you know what, we're not recording this morning. We're not in a space to create the perfect podcast. We're not going to be able to control all of the things because we're not as on our game as we would like to be when we're recording. But in actual fact, I actually think sometimes things come up when we're not in that ding, 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 like quote unquote perfect or like completely on our game space, that sometimes I don't think would come up when we are. So I actually think it enriches these conversations, and it makes them more real and more authentic and more whole in the fact that we kind of cover all the aspects. I don't know how you feel. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, my off the game brain it's fantastic.
Right?
It's creative. It's confusing, but I mean, it will take you on an adventure. So,
and if you want real, this is the way to get it.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about how the need to have control is actually controlling you. A lot of people struggle with the need to have perceived control. And I use that word perceived because control, we'll get into it a little bit later, it doesn't exist.
Well, it's more of an illusion, isn't it? It's like we think we're in control, but actually, not really. Not in the way that we think that we are when in those like, yeah, I've got this. I've got it. Everything's under control. Really?
Are you sure?
Maybe not.
I'm not going to show you the flip side of the coin, but the reason for this is a lot of people do not have a well-met security need. And this is about your physical and emotional safety.
Yeah.
So the belief is if I have control of things, that'll be safe. And it's a strategy to get our security need met. But in actual fact, control is an illusion, as Claire said.
Isn't there something else we spoke about recently that was an illusion as well? Oh, it's that thing that tends to show up with control, right? Perfectionism, and like perfection is an illusion, and control is an illusion. Isn't that funny? Funny how those things work. Yeah, absolutely. But it's also an illusion that we tend to buy into.
Oh, definitely. I mean, we're on the David Copperfield train with the magic show there. We're like, oh yeah, like people. That's such a good to be able to say I got this. People feel like I'm in control of the situation. No, I got this means I know how to meet my needs. Like,
right.
Throw it at me.
Absolutely. And the thing is, it's an illusion that you and I both bought into for a long time. Like
sometimes I'm like, oh, you're not real.
Yeah. I see you creeping in there. That's not how this works. Yeah. It's that realization of that we've spent a long time trying to control because we thought it was possible to control. And there are things that we can influence and there are things that are completely 100% within our sphere of control, but not normally the things that we're trying to control when we think that we quote unquote have control, right?
Absolutely. And as you said, there are things that we can control. And the only things that we can control are our own actions, our own choices, and our own behaviors. How we choose to respond to what's happening in life,
right.
That's what we can control.
Right. And even that, I'm like, I don't even like using the word control when it comes to those things. I personally, control feels tense to me. It feels like restrictive, like limiting. For me, like I prefer choose.
Yes.
Like we can choose our actions, we can choose our choices, and by choosing that, that's 100% within our sphere of influence. I think that like we spoke about the importance of language in terms of not harming others in episode 19, the C word. If you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend going back and having a listen to that one. But language isn't only important in terms of not doing harm to others. It can actually make a huge influence and impact on how we feel about things. And when we think like I'm controlling my actions, I'm controlling my choices, I'm controlling my behaviors, it kind of brings this feeling of tension within the body, and it feels very restrictive, like heavy. Whereas when I think, I'm choosing my actions, I'm choosing my choices, it feels like I can breathe, like that control. Like I feel like my breathing's almost restricted when I think about it. When I think of like choosing something, I'm like, I can choose that. That's something I can choose, and it's 100% within my sphere of influence. So I just wanted to jump in there because and we'll do another podcast episode without doubt about language use and how language can support and not support our needs so well, because I know it's been a big thing for you personally, it's been a big thing for me personally, but I just think that even using this word control when it comes to ourselves, it can really affect how we feel, and it can affect our needs.
And to tag on to something that you just said, now I just got to remember what it was you just said.
We're going to be imperfect on this episode too.
Yeah, you're not getting the edited version. So take a moment, take a sip of your coffee while I think of what I was just talking about.
I'm going to have a sip of my tea. We're talking about language and about not using the word control, about choosing.
I got it. Control is a constricting word.
Yes.
And like Claire said, it really kind of binds you and it boxes you in. And just the usage of that word, it's like, ooh, like it's almost like your body tenses up.
Yeah.
But choice is empowering, and empowerment and choice actually meets one of your needs. And I know we're going to go into it more.
It actually meets more than one.
Yes.
There's one it has a massive impact on, but there's others as well.
Choice has helped me with my own self-empowerment and my personal power in ways that, I mean, we're going to get into it a little bit later in this episode. This was something that I really struggled with at first.
And I got to say, it's really quite funny thinking about the fact that, I mean, you said something that was really important there, which is that word control is constricting. It's like putting you in a box. And we are two people. If anyone tries to put us in a box, it's like,
Fuck your box.
yes. Screw your box. I don't want to be in a box. There is no box. Like,
Punching out of it. Oh,
yeah.
I almost took out a headset there, punching. I mean, that's how boxes, like, I get angry. I almost took out the podcast setup trying to punch away from the invisible box.
No boxes here. And it's interesting how if we perceive that anybody else is trying to put us in a box, oh, hell no, that's not happening. But we put ourselves in this box for so many years. Like, we were like, oh, this is kind of a cozy box. We didn't realize it was a box. We didn't see it as a box, and we didn't notice, hold on a second, I'm putting myself in a box. I hate this. Like,
we were like cats. If it fits, I sit.
Sits, right?
It's like we're kind of wiggling into these places. We're like, oh yeah, this is comfy if I sit just like this. I mean, like, you had to get yourself into the perfect position. No, you're...
Yeah, and the funny thing is that in these days, if we think that, like, we're more aware of it now,
definitely,
and also, I mean, we're both Sagittariuses, and obviously we've got different elements in our charts, but that kind of sense of freedom and adventure is a big thing for us. So, like, now, even if we notice that we're starting to put ourselves in some kind of box, it's like, oh, hold on. There's another way. There will always be another way of doing this. No boxes here. So it's just, I just thought it was really funny when you said that. I'm like, oh my goodness, you're right. And we were putting ourselves in boxes, and we hate that.
Yeah. I mean, like, as you're talking, I'm getting that kind of feeling. I'm like, oh,
yeah, I get kind of itchy. I'm like, nope, I got to stretch. Can I breathe?
And the more I realize it's an illusion, I'm like, it's like sunk in so well that it's just an illusion. I'm like, I don't even want to use the word anymore, because I'm like, you can't, like,
there is no box.
Right. The box is in your imagination.
And that's the funny thing is that the control is an illusion. So that control box doesn't exist, but the impact that the perception of that has on you, it still constricts you as if you were in a real box. It's almost like you're in a plexiglass box where, like, it doesn't look like there's a box there, but all of a sudden, if you try and, like, push against, it's like, oh no, I can't breathe, and I can't stretch, and I can't move, but I can't even see why, because I can't see the box, because it's not really. I mean, it's a weird, like, when you actually kind of break it down,
we're all mimes.
Weird. Sorry,
we're all mimes,
right? Like, yeah, like, let me out.
It's like, just step out.
Right. Absolutely.
And it's kind of funny because the more we try to control others in outside situations, the more we actually realize we don't have control.
Right. And so I'm going to jump in here. So the less safe we feel, because remember, this is often linked to the security need. And so because we feel less safe.
Because we feel safe, we try to get more control.
Right.
Like, trying to, I'm like,
normally that's so seamless between the two of us. I love that it was like, oh, hold on a second. Oh no, I get it. I see where she's going with this.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
I knew you would.
So when we realize we don't have control, all of a sudden we're like, oh no, I don't have that. I need it. So we try to take more control.
Yeah.
And then we realize we don't have control. And then we try to take control
safe,
more.
Right.
And then so on and so forth. And. Don't get yourself into an and spiral.
Oh my goodness, no.
Because the more we try to control, the less safe we feel.
And I just want to kind of just jump in there, like how interesting this is. And this shows up so frequently with needs, which is that by trying to meet a need, we often compromise needs. And what's really interesting in this situation, and this comes up very frequently with a lot of other needs as well, by trying to meet our security need, we actually undermine and negatively impact our security need because of the strategy, because of how we're trying to do this. And this is why we always say, like, how you try and meet your needs is as important, if not more important, than it is to know what your needs are, because the how can make such a huge impact to the feeling that we have, but also it can actually be, if we're not mindful of the things that will actually affect the how in a way that will mean that it will meet our needs better, we can be doing this thing over and over again trying to meet the need, and hold on a second, actually it's compromising the need. I'm just trying to think right now, like, which episode we went into. I think it was maybe episode 3 where we went into the into the what our needs are and how, and we talked about the red green spectrum. If you haven't gone through them, I highly recommend going back and listening to those first few episodes that we recorded. The Move Over Maslow, we do a little overview, and then we kind of drop into some of these concepts at a deeper level. But really understanding the way that we meet the need is so important, and this is one example of why, because if we don't understand the best ways of meeting our needs, we can be doing something to try and meet our need and actually be costing the very need that we're trying to meet.
And in addition to that, you could be trying to meet this one need and doing these things that really aren't meeting the need or actually costing the need. And you're actually costing all of these needs because you're so focused. I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do this. And this one, you're not even doing it. And then there's 20 other things that are getting impacted. And then you come out of this situation, you're like, well, that's done, but fuck.
Right.
Like, where did these come from? Well, that came from you trying so hard to meet this need in a negative or non-effective way.
Right, exactly.
When we're taking the wholeness of our needs into perspective, we're able to see like, oh, I can meet this need in this way, but it doesn't quite feel good over here.
Right.
Wait a minute, I can do this, which it meets this need and it meets these needs.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Like there is that option. You just have to
doing it.
You have to find it. And sometimes it doesn't look the way that we think it should. It's not the way that we, may want it to. We can't control how it looks.
And it may not be the way that it has looked for a long time. It may require some change. And actually, I'm really glad that you brought this up. We're going to do an upcoming podcast on the needs formula, where we start talking about this, like where we need to make sure that there is a balance, where it's the way that we're trying to meet a need isn't costing a bunch of needs. And I've got an amazing story to tell about some work that I did with some high-end clients several years ago, which just so perfectly illustrates and highlights that you can be doing something to meet your needs and not being aware of just how much it's costing your needs on the flip side. So we will get into that in another podcast episode. Stay tuned. So it's important to say that this can be very helpful to be aware of, because as the attempt to have perceived control is an attempt to get our security need met. When we learn, welcome to Key West, whoever's just flying in. When we learn how to meet our own security need in nourishing ways, in fulfilling ways, our perceived need for control reduces, and in some cases can disappear completely, because control is an ineffective way to try to meet our security need. If we find effective ways of meeting our security need, the desire to use that strategy melts away. It's like we were talking about on one of the previous episodes. If we believe this is the only way that we can get it, I think it was the perfectionism episode, I think it was the last one we were talking about, where it's like, if we believe that we have to be perfect to get our needs met, and we get our needs met without being perfect, oh my goodness, it actually starts to undermine that belief. The same is true with this one. It's like, if we believe that we have to have control in order to be safe, to get our security need met, or if we get our security need met without having control, it kind of undermines that belief system. And that can help us to kind of reduce and release some of that perceived need and that desire to have the control. Now, it is important to say at this point that we live in a society that is actually not safe for a lot of people for a number of different reasons. It may be because of systemic privilege, where they just simply are less safe. I mean, one of the horrific examples is women are just less safe when out and about living their lives because of the systemic privilege we have in our society, where some people believe they have a right to attack women, and obviously that's one level of systemic privilege. And it's even worse when we start to look at Black, brown, Indigenous and other melanated women, and when we start to look at trans women, and we start to look at when you layer on the levels of privilege, the level of safety goes down. I mean, when you look at the and just trigger warning here, I'm just going to mention about the violence against trans women. When you look at the rate that trans women are killed every single year, and the number of those who are Black, brown, Indigenous and melanated people, if you don't know that term, that was a term that was coined by According to Wheeze. And if you don't follow her, I highly recommend it. Her content is amazing. So it's important to be aware that our society is just not as safe for some people that it is for others. The security need is always going to be affected until there is systemic change. That means that we no longer as women feel unsafe, and those people who are more marginalized than we are also less safe. So as we learn to meet our own needs, and especially for those of us with systemic privilege, as we learn to meet our needs, we need to be a part of creating systemic change in our society so that we can all feel more safe and secure, so that our security need is not going to be compromised by our social environment. Because remember, with that interconnectedness piece, if somebody else the more barriers that somebody else has to getting their needs met, and therefore the less their needs are met, the more it's going to affect us and our needs as well. So we need to be a part of recognizing that objectively this world is not safe for a lot of people. And so not only do we want to start to meet that security need in whichever way we can within that context, so we feel more safe and more secure than we did, but we actually need to also be a part, especially where the world is a bit safer for us because we have more privilege, to be a part of creating that systemic change in order that those needs are not being compromised for anybody. Because ultimately, and I think we also need to do an upcoming episode on the forest, the trees in the forest.
Yes.
When we'll get into that. I think we've kind of mentioned it, but the relationship between us as individuals and our social environment. Like, we're trees and we live in a social environment and a physical environment that is the forest around us. And we're going to do a podcast explaining about that relationship a little bit better. But I just wanted to say, like, because it's very easy with those of us with systemic privilege to go, oh yeah, I can meet my safety need. It's easy to meet my safety need. Well, yeah, if you have more systemic privilege, it is easier for you to meet your safety need. If you don't have those levels of systemic privilege, you have way more barriers to overcome in order to create safety. And even there is a limit to what we can do for ourselves, because that lack of safety is a systemic issue that's caused by the environment that we're in and the other people that are in that environment. So we want to be aware of, okay, we need to start changing that system and do our part in order to be a part of creating that change. Sorry, that was
no. Thank you for that. I'm just kind of that wasn't initially in there, so I'm taking it all in. That was my pause. Thank you for putting that all out there, because I think that's really important. And for people who hold privilege, that's how I started learning.
Right.
Just the little bits of information, then dive a little bit deeper, because it is important to remember we do not all have the same privilege, and we don't have the same layers of safety, and
therefore it's harder for some people to get their needs met than it is for others. Mm-hmm. Like coming back to needs, it all comes back to needs, and the reality is, it is just easier for some people to get their needs met because they don't have those barriers. It doesn't mean to say it's easy. It's just easier than it is for the people who have those levels of barriers. And the more barriers there are, obviously, the harder it is for them to get their needs met, the further away they are from that level of fulfillment that those people who have privilege have.
Mm-hmm. And back to, I don't want to kind of move on,
Right.
It's like, how do you move on from that? Because I kind of want to go down into it more, but I know we'll get into this in a further episode.
There will be more podcast episodes about this, without doubt.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So back to control a little bit. Well, a lot of it, because that's what the episode is about, I guess. I really, really, really struggled with control. Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny. We were trying to come up with real life examples for me. It was so hard to remember them all because there were so many instances where simply if it didn't look a certain way, it wasn't successful. And
actually, I want to go one step further. If it didn't look your way.
Yeah.
Because I'm saying that this is not me pointing the finger at Serena. Mm-hmm. I used to be the same way, so I completely get it.
Well, in perfect to one person, my level, if it's something I'm doing, my perfect is even higher. So
yeah.
Yes, very much, very much so. It really affected all areas of my life. It affected my marriage, my work, my friendships, and even the fun things. We've talked before, Fantasy Fest down here is a huge event. And I think we mentioned it in one of the episodes, my love of making costumes and the need to have perfection or control over every piece of costume that went out, because the perceived value. There were so many layers to it.
Yeah.
But I was trying to control the situation. It's no, that glitter is off. Serena, nobody's going to notice that. But I do. Like, those little things just would spin me out. And then I wouldn't do, I'd be aiming for perfection, not good enough. And then it would be right down to the wire and I'd get it done.
And it's interesting, actually, because this kind of dovetails with something we talked about within the Self First series. Like this example that you're giving, it wasn't also just about the costuming. I've remembered like how many times had you and I spent hours putting these costumes together for this one evening. And then when we were with a big group of people. And when some of those people decided they wanted to do something different to what we were doing, I remember it really affected your experience of that night. And because you weren't in control and you wanted to control what the night looked like for everybody because you had an idea in your head of how it was going to look.
Yep.
And when they went a different way, I mean, literally physically went a different way.
Yeah, all of a sudden I was like,
okay, they've gone. And I remember like that one instant, it really affected your night. And it did for me too. Like I was like, oh, I thought we were all going to hang out tonight.
I think everybody was a little bit like,
yes. Oh,
but for me, it was, everybody else was on. I was like, are you fucking, I mean, I took it to a, like, internally. It wasn't, I didn't, try to affect anybody else's night, but I'm a high energy. You put me in a costume, I'm done. I'm extra,
all
on,
the whole shebang.
And I was just really quiet. I was just like, yeah, no, I'm
and I
I'm
immediately knew. I'm like, what's going on? Like I can tell something's going on, and
that ended up controlling the night.
It did, and it actually ruined your night because I remember I don't even think we stayed out. We actually went, I think we went home.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that this kind of dovetails quite nicely with, we mentioned in the Self First series about Serena's birthday party this year, where again, we had a significant group of people. It wasn't quite as big as the other one, but it was a significant group of people still. And it was remarkable seeing, having done the needs work, the difference in you between that experience and this experience, where when other people went off to do things, you were like, oh, cool. Okay. Well, we might see you later. We're doing this. And that was the thing, was that we chose, like looking at that difference in language again, you chose that, and you knew that I was with you the whole night, no matter what happened, because that was what I was choosing. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be a part of it all night. And there were a couple of other people for whom that was true as well. And I think there was probably maybe 2 or 3, I think there were 3 people that were actually with you all night, that no matter what happened, maybe 2.
Yeah. No, it was 3.
Yeah. Once we picked up the third person.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was just those.
And one of them was a dear friend that I love, but very random in the mix. Like it was Claire, my husband, and then another friend. But it was magical, and somebody went, oh, this person went to dinner. Good, they need to eat, because if they eat and come back, they're gonna be so much more fun, better. Not, like why wouldn't
they're gonna enjoy it more.
They're gonna enjoy it more. Let them, okay.
And I remember you saying to me, like, these are the people I want to be with me all night, and I know I'm going to have a good time. And the cool thing was, we had a great time when there was a huge number of people with us. We had a great time when there was just literally the 3 or 4 of us, because I think it was 3 of us before we got to that point where we picked up the 4th person.
Yep. And then other people came back, and it was like, oh, you came back. Awesome. Come on, we're still having fun.
And then we had dinner. We ended up eating with them, even though they'd already eaten. So we all like hung out a little bit more. And then some people were like, actually, you know what? I'm kind of feeling it. I think I'm going to go home. And you're like, cool. And it was so interesting because, and the interesting thing also was, like, from my point of view, this night, it didn't end the way it was, quote unquote, supposed to.
Not at all. I actually, after my friends, the first group of friends were like, no, we do one more bar and it's over. And I'm like, yeah, no, go, like, cool. Thank you for coming back. Like all of the things. Right. And then we got to the next bar and I was like, I'm done. Like, This was
because we started early.
Yeah,
like we
did.
started like 4 p.m. So it wasn't like we'd been out for 2 hours and had decided to call it. This was, I mean, we'd probably
like,
been out for like 6 or 7 hours. At
it
this
was
point.
like 12:31.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, we wanted to go sing karaoke, and that was the end of the night, and that's always like an amazing end to the night, and it usually goes till 4:30 or so.
And so much so that because we actually did a little stop at the same place earlier on in the evening, and as you may or may not remember, the theme of this party was all that glitters isn't old, because it was a significant birthday for Serena, and so we had glitter. Like Serena had actually hidden glitter somewhere in this bar, so we could return to it later and have fun. That if we didn't have any glitter left by that point, we could still have some glittery fun when we got to our final stop. We never made it. And it was like, and it was interesting because on both sides, I had an expectation, because I was the one who planned and organized everything, that we were going to end up at this place at the end of the night. And years back, I would have been like, oh, like that, like it didn't go the way it was supposed to, i.e. the way I thought it was meant to go. I wasn't in control of it happening the way that I thought it was meant to happen. And it was so funny, because when you were like, okay, I think I'm done, I'm like, and all night, I'm just going to say, all night, Serena kept saying to me, I'm having such a great night. I'm having so much fun. I'm having such a good time. And I'm like, did you have a good night? Like when she left, I'm like, did you have a good night? She was like, oh my God, it was so amazing. I'm like, if you had a good night and this is you done, awesome. Like that's amazing. And it was interesting, like on both sides of that, how in previous years we would have controlled the situation or tried to control the situation, or been disappointed, or it negatively impacted our needs when we weren't in control, and it didn't go that way.
Kind of letting the situation control your emotions.
Right.
So the control doesn't work in either way, because if she at the end of the night was like, oh, but I thought we were going to do this, coming from a place we're really not there in our friendship anymore.
Right.
And from a place of self-first, I'd be like, no, I'm actually tired. Let's do it this time, or whenever.
Let's do it another time, right?
But I mean, the situation didn't control, and it really was just amazing, because there wasn't any, like if at any point there was a control element to that situation, the next part of the evening wouldn't have happened,
and it reminds me in a lot of ways of a similar situation I was in with a friend whose birthday it was many, many, many years ago. I mean, we're probably talking 15 years ago. And we were doing the Circle Line pub crawl in London. Whereby you're meant to do a drink for every stop on the Circle Line, which used to be a circle and now isn't. Kind of looks like a lasso. It's kind of weird. But we'd attempted to do it a couple of years earlier, and we actually got beaten by the licensing laws in London, because you didn't have 24-hour licenses at that point, and there was nowhere to get drinks at the last 3 stops that we were supposed to. We were like, oh, we didn't complete it. So a few years later, we'd made another attempt to do it again. I mean, you can tell how long ago it is, because there's no way I'd be doing that these days. But it was a really fun night, and then we got maybe 3/4 of the way around, 2/3 of the way around, and the person whose birthday it was, who was celebrating, started to not feel well. And it wasn't like an alcohol not feel well, like she wasn't, like she was sick. And of course at that point you're like, this is your birthday, I'm sticking with you, you do what you need to do. But there was that little part of me that was like, oh, like we could have completed this. I mean, of course, that's kind of weird even saying that out loud now. Like, what would I have wanted Serena to have done in previous years? Like, fought through and not enjoyed going to karaoke just to be at karaoke, because that's how I thought it was supposed to. I mean, when you put it in those terms, like
you sound silly.
I do. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true. Like, that's often what, like, if you think, and I think sometimes that helps us in terms of this control thing, when you actually word out and speak out, put into words what it is that you're feeling disappointed about. Like, oh, hold on a second. This is not a great way of approaching this.
No.
So, and I know that you used to have this challenge with vacations, right?
Yes. I love planning trips, and I always try to find like the coolest little things to do. And I used to, as I said, have a little issue with control, and just tiny, yeah,
just a little bit,
bitty bit. And And like I'm hesitating on this just because I feel so bad. Shout out to my travel buddy for life, Christina, because she put up with this a lot. I plan these vacations and I have maps of what's in every area and, you know, all the things to do. And if something didn't go right, I would absolutely lose my shit. Total meltdown, like on a pendulum swing, like, whoa. I mean, I've said her name, so Christina, I hope you don't mind. I'm gonna reach out and check with her to make sure she's okay with the shout out on this, just so everybody knows. But there were times where I remember we went to San Francisco and we got dropped off like 2 miles away from where we were supposed to be. Oops. She's like, all right, let's walk. And I start like, I'm huffing and puffing, and I think I was probably crying. I know I'm like swearing, and all of a sudden the distance between us just gets a little bit bigger.
What's really funny is that you put your hands in front of the mic as you demonstrated that, and you sounded more distant from the mic as you were trying to indicate it. It was kind of funny.
I'm great at these sound effects. And it come to find, she was letting me have, I mean, props to her. Most people would have been like, what's wrong? Oh no, trying to placate me. She's like, you take your moment, you calm down, and you come back when you can be an adult.
Right.
Pretty much. And I mean, our trip was amazing, and it was every vacation. I mean, I don't know if I've ever had a perfect vacation, but I've learned to take those imperfections and take what I was trying to control and let it be the adventure. And like, who knows where it's going to end up now? And losing that control, that sense of the need to control things has let me like really go with the flow, and it's put me in places I never would have been. It's introduced me to people I never would have met. I've gotten into situations where I'm like, actually, this worked out a little bit better.
Well, that's exactly what I was about to say, actually. I was like, the amount of time that having control is making it look a certain way or wanting it to look a certain way. And actually, when you can meet that security need well enough that actually that desire for control melts away, it's incredible some of the things that happen when things don't go the way that were planned. Like I can't think of them. I mean, there's so many examples of this where it's like, hold on a second.
A quick one I'm going to say is Claire's celebration of Life Day. The first year that we celebrated it, it was we had a general idea. Ideas are cool. We're not saying like don't have a plan, don't just go willy-nilly through life, but
be flexible.
It was a loose plan, but there was a plan in place.
Right.
And if we had been like, oh, we have to be here, and this time we have to be here, and we're doing this, and we're doing this, that whole day was a mishmash of just how it happened.
Just awesomeness. Actually, and it was actually the second year we celebrated. The first year we just did drinks, remember? I'd had a day, like I'd been by myself most of the day, and then you and Joe came and joined me, and we had... we went to drinks. We saw, I think we saw Dave perform. We ended up at Bobby's.
Yes.
It was just like it was a much lower key celebration than the one you're talking about. But you're right. Like, I mean, what we tend to do is that when the way we kind of approach things now, and I'll get into this a little bit more in a minute, is that we have an idea about what we're going to do, and we set out to create that. And then we're flexible. It's like, oh, hold on. If that's not happening, okay, we'll do something else, and we'll see where it takes us. And it can be, it feels almost borderline magical at times. It's like, whoa, how did we end up here?
Another example is the unbirthday party that I threw for Claire, and it was a surprise party with characters and all of these things. And we were just a teeny bit behind schedule, and some communications were off. And all of a sudden, Claire walks around the corner, and we're setting up. And at that point, a couple of years ago, I would have lost.
It would have ruined. That's it.
But it almost created an even more magical situation, because she walked into a party that was happening, not it wasn't like a surprise. Like, she still got that. She was still surprised.
Oh, yeah.
And we still continued to set up, and it just...
And I got to help, and I got to hang out with people and say hi to people. Thing is, if I just walked in, because it was a tea party, it was a sat-down tea party, we probably would have sat down, but I got to kind of mingle and talk to different people in a way that I wouldn't have done if it had gone perfectly. And I use that. If you're not watching on the video, I've got my little air quotes up. Or if
I think you have an air quote voice.
Oh, do I?
You do. You're like, perfectly.
Okay, so I'm gonna watch for that now. That's, you know, I'm gonna be.
And now you're like, doing it. You're like,
oh
is she air quoting everything now? That's a bit ridiculous.
I think sometimes I use my air quote voice for the outro as well. Like I think sometimes it pops in there
a little bit. That's where your for radio voice,
right? But this is something that, I mean, you found affected like all of the areas of your life as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, with my marriage, stopping trying to control how discussions went, the need for control just in relationship. Like the second that was relinquished, it was like, okay, because it no longer
and I get
had
to enjoy it more.
Yeah, it no longer has to be in this box. It can do this. And sometimes we find some cool things that we really like in these outside areas where if we were trying, like me trying to control the situation, I'm like, no, this is the box we're going to be in. And like, yeah, saying it, I feel ridiculous. I'm like, what was I doing in a box? Like, who gave me a box to play with?
And you were putting other people in boxes as well. Like we both were. And it's like, hold on, we were putting ourselves in a box. We were putting our relationships in boxes. We were putting other people in boxes.
Like our friends, work had to look a certain way and people had to act this way in relation to me for me to feel that this was going well. And it's like, no, all right. You know what? Like, work can be an ebb and flow too, and not everybody has to like me. And it's like, okay, I don't see what you don't. It's not to like, but cool. You have an option. You have the choice not to like me. That's your choice.
Great,
cool. I'm glad you're making choices.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stay out of the box. It's not a cool place to be. Like, as I'm waving from.
Get rid of the box. Like, no more boxes. Yeah, it's funny how many boxes that we put in our lives because of control. I mean, I know that I've had a long journey with this, and this combines, as I've mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, perfectly with the last episode that we did on perfectionism, because I wanted things to be perfect subconsciously to get my needs met. Like I believed, like I had a subconscious belief that that's what would happen, that if by being perfect, I would get my needs met. And I believed I was the only one. I know so many people who either were in this space, are in this space. I believed I was the only one who could do it. I was the only one who could do it perfectly. I was the only one who could do it right. What I mean is I was the only one who would do it my way. And so I used to try to do everything myself because I believed it had to be perfect, and I believed I had to control everything to make it perfect, and that controlling everything looked like doing everything myself to ensure it was right, to ensure it was perfect. And I'm telling you right now, like, it's ironic thinking about the fact that I was doing that to try and get my needs met, because it was exhausting. I mean, it was costing so many of my needs without me realizing it. I didn't know that's what was happening. And it's been really interesting, like the last 12 months, like being on the other side of this control, like, mentality. And I mean, when you've been in a habit for a long time, these things still pop up at times. It's like, oh, hello, I'm still here. Like, oh, I see you. No boxes here. Thank you very much. But there are times, especially when things are stressful or things are intense, that those tendencies can kind of tend to pop up. The last 12, 18, 24 months have been a really great example of what happens when you can meet that security need well enough that you no longer have a desire to control it, no longer feel the need to have control. I mean, you look at what's happened in the last 12 months for me, and obviously we've all been in this pandemic. We've all been in this situation that that has been difficult and that we've been struggling with. But in the last 12 months, I fell down the stairs and broke my back. I got stuck in the UK, unable to get back to where my business partner was, to where a lot of my chosen family are, to the place where my heart feels probably most at home, in anywhere in the world. I had to travel to another country in order to get into said country. And when I say, I mean, I make it sound, I mean, I'm kind of giving the light version of it, but I remember being on Zoom calls with Serena like summer last year, where I would be sobbing, like, I can't do this anymore. I cannot be just in one room. I'd been in one room for the majority of 18 months. and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I mean, I'd coped with that 18 months because I knew how to meet my needs, and I knew I was reaching the end of that ability to cope. I mean, I know I would have been able to cope, but it was affecting my needs so much. I'm like, we need to find a way around. And we looked at every option possible to try and get me here.
Don't go through all the options.
No, we're not going through all the options. I mean, when we get creative.
I really thought out of the box on
we
things.
get
I'm like,
really
what
creative.
about this?
Like, well, that's an option, yes. Which is what led me to go via Mexico to get in here. That was the option that we ended up choosing. And then I got back here, and then I had to deal with, as we spoke about, again, I think it was how to stop yourself from burning out. We talked about like when you're finally in that space where you can relax. And I think that's episode 18, where once you can finally out the other side of the experience that has had you burnt out, then you got to process the experience that led to being burnt out. That then happened. I then twisted my ankle. Now, as a dancer who hadn't danced in nearly 2 years, getting back here, dancing for 2 weeks, and then being laid up where I couldn't even walk for, I mean, it was a good month. I was probably off. I then had 2 really nasty viruses back to back that were not COVID, but really took me out at the knees. Like I was in bed with like fever and chills. Very unusual for me. It wasn't something that happened very often. Then I got COVID, and I mean and then obviously I was trying. I put in my application for my US working visa. So there was a huge amount of stress and pressure, and we went through so many things. Like our original attorney ghosted. I mean, there's been so much that has happened over this past year, and I remember. That we were talking about it just recently, and Serena was like, you want a great example of letting go of control? Your last 12 months. Because at any one of those junctures, I mean, and there were times where it started to crop up. Like when I was stuck in the UK and couldn't get back, that like tendency of like, oh my God, like what can we do? Like we have to make this. And all of a sudden, okay. What's the way that we feel is the way that's in alignment for this to happen? And as soon as it was interesting because as soon as we looked at lots of different options, as soon as we picked Mexico, everything started to flow. It felt there was a sense of ease around it. It took effort, but there was a sense of ease around it. Same thing with the visa application. It felt like we were banging our head against a brick wall for a period of time. And I'm like, and I'm panicking, like, oh my goodness, like I don't want to get to the point where I have to leave the country and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, click, something fell into place. And if I had been trying to control it, I'd have been trying to force it to happen the way that we had originally begun with it happening.
I can't imagine.
Oh my goodness. It would have been horrific. One, it wouldn't have happened.
It wouldn't have happened.
I wouldn't still be here right now. That's just a simple fact. And by letting go of control and allowing it to kind of fall apart, which it did, and then all of a sudden another option came up, and the option was actually so much better, and it seemed to be a better option in so many ways. But if I tried to control it, I would have, I mean, as I said, I wouldn't be here right now.
It's almost like you're playing with, like, I'm not sure if you have them across the pond, but Lincoln Logs. They're like little blocks that kids build cabins out of.
Okay.
Like little cabin blocks or any sort of blocks. You're building a house and then it gets knocked over, out of blocks, and you're like, okay, I'm going to build the same house. And you keep doing that every time it gets knocked over. What's happening, because there's no sense of control that it needs to look this way.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, actually, I think I'm going to put an addition on this time. Or now this time I'm going to do a high rise.
This block fell this place. Oh, hold on. If we use that could become like a garage, or that could be like a guest suite. Like there's different.
And it could be anything,
right? It could be a dance studio. It could be our own karaoke space. I mean, who knows?
You can create, when you let go of control, you can really create what you want to, because you're able to not have it look a certain way. And I think that's part of the creation process, is people get this idea. This is it. Right. This is what I'm going to create.
Right.
That's the idea of what you want to create. The way to getting there doesn't always look how we want it to.
Or how we expect it to. But it often can look better. I mean, you look at the fact that we're sat here right now. When I first started out this business, I thought I was going to be doing it on my own. I never in a million years thought I would have a business partner. I thought I would end up working with a team, but I didn't think I would end up working with a business partner. And people asked me to do this podcast for so long. And I was like, doesn't feel right yet. Yeah, I get it. I think it's going to happen, but it doesn't feel right yet. It doesn't feel right yet. And even when we first started working together, we would never have thought of doing the podcast together like this. I cannot imagine what the podcast would have looked like if it had just been me talking. I mean, one, I'd have got bored with that. I don't know, but people listening probably would have got bored with that. Like, the fun of this podcast, the reason it works so well is because of our dynamic and because we are silly and we bounce off each other, and you say something and, oh, that reminds me of something that I wouldn't have thought to say on a podcast otherwise. We literally wouldn't be here if I had tried to control this process. And this was something that I found with the business, is that I can have an idea about where I think it's going, and I can be moving it in the direction of that idea. And then all of a sudden this other option opens. And I'm like, oh, okay. Let's explore that one then and see what happens. But the old me, the control me, would have been like, oh no, this is how it's meant to look. So we're going to keep doing that. And I just think how less rich and how much less fun this would be if I was doing it by myself.
You wouldn't have the fun parent.
So I said to Serena when we were planning out this set of podcasts, I'm like, I've just got to say, like, we mentioned this in several episodes. Like, we have this phrase that we use. I've just got to say this to clear it. And sometimes that's a serious thing, and sometimes it's like a silly thing. This is one of those silly things where we were talking about the content for the podcast and how we split it up, because quite often, because I am a few years ahead of Serena on the path when it comes to understanding needs, knowing about needs, teaching about needs. Sometimes,
and since you created the content,
well, yeah, that too.
Give yourself that credit.
That too. That sometimes, like, because of that, when we're kind of going deep into content, when we're looking at more nuanced content or more complex content, when we're splitting out the episodes, Serena will say, "Oh, can you do that?" Or I'll say, "Do you want me to do this piece?" And most of the time when I say that, it's like, "Oh yeah, could you do that piece? I can do this piece and I can do that piece." So I said to her, I was like, sometimes it feels like I'm the serious parent who does like the content and the serious stuff, and she gets to be the fun parent, where like it's like, you know, sometimes in a parental unit, that there's the disciplinarian and there's the fun parent, because they haven't found a way to be partners in all of those things. I mean, the good thing is that as we're moving forward, that's getting more and more balanced. Like, you're delivering more content and I'm getting to be more fun. But yeah, it's that whole like, sometimes I feel like you're the fun parent. I want to be the fun parent. Maybe we should do that. We should do an episode where it's like, I'm not going to do any content. I don't want to do the serious. I'm just going to be fun for the whole episode.
You're going to make faces, swear,
right,
and make nonsensical
do funny
comments.
dances on camera, like all the things that you get to do. And that's the thing. But it works because we understand the dynamic, and because we are partners in this. Us choosing to do that is us going, okay, this I know is my strength, this I know is your strength. But as it evolves, as it grows forward, again, it could have been something we would have controlled from the beginning. Like, okay, I'm going to do content. You're going to be the light relief within this.
And it has to come in here after this word at this time.
Like, don't jump in the middle of my content. Like, don't jump in when I'm in the middle of delivery. And there was a time that would have thrown me, where I'd have been like, oh no, I'm trying to say something and you're jumping in. I love it when you do that, because that, like, again, it adds a little bit of light relief. It adds a bit of, sometimes it adds content that I hadn't thought to include, because you have a different experience of this work. You have had a different perspective. You had different, you've been able to see it come alive in different ways to the ways that I've seen it. But yeah, it's really interesting how this control, or rather lack thereof, or that ability and choice to let go of control because we know other ways of meeting our security needs, I think is the reason that this feels so enjoyable. Certainly for me to record. I hope it does for you to record. And I hope it is for you to listen to as well, because I think that's what makes this fun.
That's why we're doing it. We don't want to do it for people to be, we don't want a podcast just to have a podcast.
Yeah, and we don't want it to be like, okay, sit down, get your paper and pen. We're going to teach you some stuff this week. And while I'm sure there's valuable information that we share, and I'm sure that people learn from listening to us, like this, we wanted this to be a combination of, yes, we want to share about these things that are really helpful in life, but we don't want it to feel like you're in class. We want you to feel like you're a part of this conversation too, and it's almost like that we're three friends sat on the couch with a cup of tea or coffee if it's Serena. Maybe you like coffee too, who knows? Maybe you don't like tea or coffee. You can have a beverage of choice. And we just sat down, like hanging out, having a chat, and because that's really how you began learning about the universal needs, wasn't it? Like that was what
it was conversational. Yeah. It was not content. I mean, Claire actually controlled what she released to it. Like there was a conscious effort to
actually, I chose.
You did choose.
I chose. I didn't control. I chose. Yeah.
Because as we've said in further earlier episodes, the I've Got a Secret episode, we don't want
episode number 8 for those who are wanting to go back and listen to that episode.
She's on point this morning. My train of thought is
I'm so sorry. You were saying about the I've got a secret episode. Yes. Sometimes the content.
Yes, we want to make what we share. There are things that you need to know to apply this content properly to your lives. That's why some things,
to not have it cost you.
Yes,
because have it work against you.
We want to help you meet your needs, not to impact them in any way. So there's certain things that are held back and
through choice.
Yeah, and so this is exactly the conversations that Claire and I were having.
Yeah.
My experiences aside, I was getting this, and this is how I kind of grasped the concept. And then a little bit more, I was like, okay, you're onto something.
This all came about by Serena was sat at one end of a couch. I was sat on the other end of a couch with various beverages of choice, water, kombucha, whether we were having lunch, whether we were having dinner. And we were just chatting about our lives. And as we were chatting about lives, I would be like, oh, that's a need thing. And I would kind of mention about that. So we kind of wanted to create a similar kind of feel for you listening, that you feel like you're sat on the couch with us having this conversation, where you're starting to learn about it in a way where it's like, oh, that thing in my relationship, oh, that's a needs thing. Oh, that thing that's happening at work, that's a needs thing. Because it's when we apply the needs to life that people really start to get it. Like I think people have an idea, they think they know what needs are. It's like, oh yeah, I'm meeting my needs. I'm having a sleep. I'm having some water. I'm having a bubble bath. I'm doing my nails, whatever it is, which as we've discussed on previous episodes, it's way more than that. At a base level, what meeting your needs is, but also the nuance and how this applies to different areas of our lives. It's not, the needs is not just, something that we do that we want to fulfill. It actually becomes a tool that helps us to understand ourselves in situations, understand other people in situations, and understand how to navigate when things come up, or just understand why things have happened the way they are. And if we want to choose something different, be able to do so.
And I want to say, on that is we want to invite you. We've said it before. Mm-hmm. If you have questions, if a situations arise, reach out to us. Contact us through our Facebook group, Instagram, our YouTube channel, Twitter. Shoot us an email.
Yeah,
we want to hear from you because we want the content to be relevant.
See, normally we're really great at finishing each other's sentences.
Can't even finish my own sentences today.
And if you want to email us, you can find out how to contact us via theuniversalneeds.com, the website.
Yes.
Yeah, so get in touch. Like, let us know. And Serena's right. We want the content to be valuable to you, to be relevant. And if there's something you're struggling with, chances are you're not alone. There's probably a whole bunch of other people struggling with the same stuff. So by you asking the question, we'll be able to help all those people too. So I think that's it for today. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, actually I do, because we've gone so long already. I want to just add a little nugget to the end. A little technique that helped me when the control came up, that word, that feeling, that just kind of energy of control, just stopping and taking a deep breath. Mm-hmm. Like, because that's that feeling of like, oh no, there's a box. Just, the box doesn't exist.
Absolutely. And like dovetailing on the back of that, like once you've had that moment to stop and pause, asking yourself, what do I want to choose? Because that, again, just switching that language and looking at what do I want to choose versus what do I need to control, that trying to flip one to another, that can be a good way of starting to shift that pattern of, okay, I got to control this. Actually, no, what do I want to choose in this situation? Like, what am I trying to create? What's my outcome? And what do I want to choose that's going to help me to get there? So thank you for that little addition. It's not very often when I say, do you want to add something, that you say yes. I'm like, yay, there's something more. Fantastic. Okay, so I think that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. We're sending you lots of love. Stay safe. And remember, between now and our next episode, remember to keep meeting your needs. Lots of love. Bye.
Hey, guys.
That's it for today.
If you like what you heard
and would like to see some of Serena's awesome facial expressions,
check out the video podcast on YouTube.
And remember, when you feel safe and secure because your security need is well met, you'll feel more able to let go of the illusion of control.
Well, shit. It really is that simple.